I'm going to get Peter to go ahead and introduce himself.
Great. Thanks so much, Savannah. Hi, this is Peter Mullins. I'm the CMO over at SetSale. SetSale, what we do is we help revenue teams to do what wins, and we do that by helping leaders see every rep activity, know what's effective, and do more of what works. So really excited to have you all here today. I see actually someone from North Carolina, which is where I am. So very excited to see that. And so today we're going to be talking about, as Savannah said, what makes a really good, really effective sales kickoff. We have some terrific guest panelists with us to talk about that. And I think one of the really fun things about the format for today's session is what we're going to do. We're going to have this discussion between the four of us, but also interaction with you all that are on the line, and pulling information from that in order to pull together really a do's and don'ts for what a great SKO would look like, so that you can, see by the end of this session, this live discussion is going to generate those do's and don'ts, and you can either implement that within your own sales kickoff, or maybe take that back to sales leadership and, improve the sales kickoff before it even gets started. So, looking forward to that. So Savannah, I guess we got some results coming in already.
Yeah. So our poll is looking like it's leaning more toward in-person, which is awesome. We've got some virtual, some hybrid, but mostly in person. So I think that's kind of where we're shifting towards. So that's exciting.
Great. Yeah, that's definitely going to influence some of the discussion, because there is still like the hybrid approach really up there high as well. So virtual still even today is having an impact, but yeah, we'll definitely talk about that in person. So love to introduce my fellow panelists who will be talking about what makes a great sales kickoff. So joining me today is Tom Slocum, Scott Ingram, and Leslie Bennett. So I'm going to ask each of you. Leslie, can you please introduce yourself?
I absolutely can. Thank you so much for having me, Peter. Very excited for this conversation. I am Leslie Bennett, the founder of Sales Consulting Company, my own company, Sales Team Builder, and we focus on creating conversations with prospects instead of talking at them. So I think a lot of that applies to creating strong connections inside organizations and at things like SKOs as well.
Great. Scott?
Hey, great to be here. Thanks, Peter. Scott Ingram, I am the founder of Sales Success Media, where I host the Sales Success Stories podcast and Daily Sales Tips podcast. Also a bit of an event nerd. We actually hosted our last Sales Success Summit here in Austin in October. I got super aggressive at the end of that, and I asked, was this the best sales event you've ever been to, yes or no? And 91% said yes. And 100% who said no rated it 5 stars. So wow. I think I might have a thing or two to share on kind of the rep experience around SKO, and can't wait for this convo.
Terrific. That sounds great, and love to see other event nerds out there chiming in too. So it's a safe space for event nerds. Tom.
Hey, great to be here. I'm super excited to be on a panel of such legends like you all. I am founder of my own company as well, a consulting company for the top of the funnel go-to-market motions for early stage companies in that funnel. So it's been fun. I'm 4 months in. I've been to SKOs. I've planned SKOs. So I've seen it from both sides. And like Scott said, total nerd about it. I like doing events. I did my own 8-hour live event at the end of the year. And I did it under 12 days. So it's fun. There's a lot of things to engage an audience and make it worth their time. So I'm excited to be here and learn from y'all, as well as share little tips that I have.
Terrific. I'm going to go ahead and, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it looks like we've got some results here for our second poll about budget. We've got tied for $500 per person or less, and $2,000. So, but pretty good range there. So just
I want to know who the 5,000 person is.
Hello.
Yeah, that has got to be.
All right, I'm going to let Peter take us away. But just a quick reminder, if you have questions throughout today, make sure you drop those in the chat, and be sure that chat is changed over to everyone, not just hosts and panelists.
Great. So Savannah, can you just confirm for me that you can see my screen?
Let's see here. I've got, like I said, I have many tabs. Let me find.
Does it look good?
Yep, we're good.
Says yes.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate it. So we'll talk a little bit about the agenda that we're going to have for today's discussion. So one of the main things we want to do is be able to set the right goals for what your SKO is. So we'll talk a little bit about what are your the key things that you want to have coming out of your SKO. We'll then go through. We've got 5 priority areas, which we'll use as sort of a platform for discussing amongst the panelists about what their priorities are, and we use that also as sort of a structure for going through what are some of those do's and don'ts. And then when we get to the end, we'll actually be capturing throughout the course of the discussion between the 4 of us, as well as through you all in your comments through the chat, and bringing that together into that set of do's and don'ts. And so we'll take a little review of that towards the end of the discussion. So as Savannah mentioned, please feel free. Definitely want your input as well. Multiplying our conversation by the input from all of you in attendance will really get us to do this crowdsourced do's and don'ts, and hopefully we can make it a better place for SKOs around the world. So looking forward to doing that. So maybe we can start off first off by talking about the goal. So with that in mind, I think SKOs can often just be a thing that we do. It's just like something that go-to-market teams have as a muscle memory. Each year, you just come back and, yep, we're going to do it again. Let's just put it on the schedule. But if you're going to invest, there's some people, apparently 19% of people that are investing, 5% of people that are investing over $5,000 per person. Clearly, there's a lot of investment in time and money that's going on here. So you really want to make sure that you have an SKO that has a great before and after moment. You were in a certain state as a sales team before, and then a certain state after that's improved. So I guess, maybe I'll just throw this out to the panelists first off. So Tom, if you don't mind jumping in first, what should you be thinking about when you're thinking about goals for your SKO?
Really strengthening your organization is the overarch, right? Is you're trying to take this moment, whether it's a couple days, one day, and bring the team together to focus on reflecting on what we've done thus far, bringing in that data, looking at some of your high performers, recognizing those things, and then discussing how we collectively are going to move forward in this following year, right? And so how do you buy that buy-in? How do you buy that camaraderie and create all of that, right? Like you said here, it's team bonding, it's performance improvements, and then it's that extra element of training and coaching. Those are what you want to focus on. So when people walk out, they feel refreshed. They feel excited about what's coming up. They feel clarity, right? They feel that clarity, that focus. So when they come back from that conference and back to the office, they know exactly what their mission is, and everybody's aligned there. Is what you're ultimately trying to get out of that.
Great. Yeah. Leslie, what do you think?
Yeah, I love that, Tom. I think it's spot on. And for me, I would say the trend line is trust. You should walk out of that SKO with a deeper level of trust built, not only within that group of peers, either your sales team or maybe more cross-functionally, but also a greater level of trust in the leaders you're following. In the company. And I think, Tom, you said something really smart about clarity, and such an important piece of the SKO and getting it right is making sure that you, the leader of the company, the CEO, the founder, are taking time to share your vision. Not just we need to hit 1 million ARR, 5 million, whatever it is, but that compelling vision and story that sets that clear expectation and narrative that your team wants to buy into and follow along with in the coming year.
Great. Yeah.
Good luck following that up, Scott.
Yeah, well, I'll just go in a completely different direction so that I don't have to compete with that. I think you really want to think, obviously, it's kind of the why. Like, why are we doing this? And if you project forward and think about what is the ultimate outcome? Like, how will we know that this was a successful SKO? And the other thing I like to think about is, how do you extend the half-life of the event? Like, events that that excitement, that drive that you have coming off afterwards, like falls off so fast. So how do you extend it? How do you prolong it? How do you carry through that energy, not just for a couple of days or a week afterwards? How do you carry that forward for the rest of the month and another quarter and really drive off of it? And I think if you go in with that mindset and you think about how to do that, it's a lot easier to do.
I love these comments. It's really interesting because too often I think you can think of a sales kickoff as being something that's about training or process, or getting the numbers. But each of you really did zoom in on this idea of the motivation and the vision that can really carry a team through the ups and downs that are going to come through the course of the year. Is that on base?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, part of this, especially as we're going back to in person, we have to be so mindful of that because we may not have seen each other in years, or maybe we haven't even met yet. There's so many organizations. I mean, this is true for me. Like I have colleagues I'm yet to meet who I interact with on a weekly basis. And I think one of the really important things, and I'll probably make this point again, but just having white space in the event. I think we tend to over-engineer, we cram this agenda because the mindset is, oh my God, we've only got 2 days, or we've only got 3 days, or whatever your time period is, and you try and pack it all in. Leave space, give people time to process, give people time to connect and have those conversations. And my favorite word that Leslie said was trust, right? Allow for that trust and those connections to be built within your team, because that's the thing that carries things forward post-event.
That is great insight. Tom or Leslie, any other words on this?
I'm just grateful to be here. Scott and Leslie, yeah, that is just, it's about that, right? And I love how Scott kind of talks about what we're trying to get out of this SKO is what happens for the future. It's a micro moment. And yes, it's 3 days. And how do we drive that key element in that? But gosh, what are we going to instill that comes 3 weeks from now, 4 months from now? How does it take that energy and expand that throughout the whole year? Because again, back when I did them in enterprise space, like it'd be a year between me meeting my account executives and my team, right? Because we all worked remote through the year in our offices and we got together during the SKOs. And so you go a year. So how do you keep that energy, that buy-in, that mission, and all of that through all those relationships when they're going to go back to being distant until the next year? Right. So that was kind of a great point.
Something that popped into my head while Scott was talking was like the old cliche that facts tell and stories sell. And I think some of that is going on at the SKO, right? Like we do have to strike a balance of digging into the data a bit. Often part of SKOs are going to be doing those retros, understanding how we can use that data to make better decisions going forward. And that's deeply important work. But I doubt that in 6 months, when we ask somebody their favorite part of the sales kickoff, they're going to be like, I loved that pipeline workshop. It was wow. They're going to remember those white space moments for bonding. They're going to remember those inspirational moments, and that's what they'll carry forward to keep, as I put in the chat, the vibes going all year long.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and this is great. So one of the things that as we're kind of moving forward in this discussion, Leslie had asked the question in the chat, what is your favorite SKO moment, most memorable SKO moment? So definitely chime in on the chat with your thoughts on what you remember from last year's, from 10 years ago, from an SKO that really stood out, and you want to share with the rest of the listeners. So great. We'll switch gears now from goals and kind of go through one level down and talk a little bit about, what are some of the priorities. So we've kind of seeded this conversation with some of the top 5 priorities. There's others, of course, but this is just a nice framework for us to kind of continue that conversation about what a great SKO is going to look like. So the first one that I wanted to throw out to the panel is around getting engagement. I already heard about that idea of white space and making sure that it's not just someone up on the stage talking and hitting you with slides. But maybe one of the things that I'd like to explore a little bit is we saw that hybrid is important. We saw that virtual is important. So how can you do engagement, when you're in a virtual world? Are any thoughts on that?
Just my real quick thought on the virtual thing is I think if you are doing virtual or you're doing something that's primarily virtual, you have to think about it differently than an in-person event. It is not like, oh, well, we'll take what we would have done in person and we'll do it virtually. You have to recognize that they're different things. And my biggest recommendation is do not try to do anything near full day type of things. Even half day is probably too much. If you're going virtual, spread it out over a month and a half, 2 months. Do it in short bursts. Try and make each burst really impactful and memorable and exciting, rather than just having somebody sit in front of their computer for 4, 6, 8 hours. You're going to have no impact with that approach.
Yeah, so
100%.
true. Yeah, go ahead, Leslie.
I was just going to like very anecdotally, I've spent a huge chunk of my career either in companies that have big events portfolios or are event adjacent. And even in my most recent role, our parent company ran a lot of events through the pandemic. And so certainly they weren't SKOs, they were events for our customers. But what we found worked best was a maximum of 4 hours. If it was completely virtual, that was really like after 4 hours, you saw that engagement really dip. And something else that they did that was incredible during the pandemic, because we could not have a live event, is they hosted a 1-day event, but it was 4 sessions and then a networking. And none of the sessions were from internal speakers. It was moderated by the parent company CEO, but all 4 sessions were very much meant to be thought-provoking, where they helped you develop like personal characteristics and overall business acumen, but they weren't those nitty-gritty sales topics. And I will always remember that set of presentations, because I had access to external perspectives and insights that I wouldn't have had access to because we couldn't have afforded to have those same speakers if it was in-house.
Right.
So that's, I think a special way that you can maybe have different types of catalysts if you're in a virtual environment.
Yeah, that's great. And Scott.
Yeah, so I want to continue like on that theme, especially for the folks. One of the polls, there's a lot of folks that don't have large budgets, right? So obviously, it's really hard to bring in outside speakers and things like that when you have limited budgets. Part of the reason I started the Sales Success Stories podcast was because I wanted those stories from top performers. And the seed for that was actually planted. I was at a great startup back in the day, pre-IPO company called Bizarre Voice. And we had brought in an outside speaker, and he was teaching this stuff. And I was just struck by the idea that this is insane. This guy doesn't know our business. He doesn't know our customers. And there's so much more talent in this room. I'd rather hear from them, right? So when you're thinking about engagement, look to your own team, right? Look to the superpowers of the top performers on your team and give them the stage, give them the opportunity to share the things that they're doing, the things that they're doing to win. These don't have to be long. Again, they could be one idea. They can be TED Talk sort of style, keeping it really dynamic, but you've got talent in the room that they're already on salary you can tap, and they're going to love you for it too. Like we all love that stage. We love the opportunity to share those ideas and how we're winning.
Right. Yeah. I mean, salespeople don't mind getting up on a stage. So there's absolutely, you might as well take advantage of that. And you're right. It's not only, it's an incentive for many people. Like people get excited about being able to get up on stage and share their insights.
That's it.
Yeah. We did that at a few SKOs. We had them prep, the AE and the SDR would prep their territory and their year in a recap, and whoever did it the most creative way or the most engaging way, we gamified it, right? And then they would come up and they would present, they would share these things, and what you're hitting on is this again builds that lasting effect after the fact. This is where that energy comes from. These people are able to learn from one another and feel more of a team camaraderie. Like you said, Scott, I don't want somebody from the outside coming in and for 3 days learning their sales methodology and sitting here going through all of this versus just tapping on one another. It's free work. It's free recognition. It's an opportunity for these folks to get growth, right? Again, as a company, now you're leveling up your folks and they're sharing that like, wow, I've been with my company for a year and I got the opportunity to present at this SKO and do a whole segment around, closing the phone call, right? And you get 3 or 4 of your team members to go through that. They're your top performers. It's a different game. And you can, not spread your budget because they're already on your squad.
I have a bit of a challenge then on that one. And maybe this is talking about like what should the SKO be? And I'm sure it's different for different organizations. I don't think the SKO should be training focused. I think that is not the best time and place. And that doesn't mean that if you're gathering in person, it couldn't be fun to do like a live role playing session or something, right? But having a very training focused SKO, I think that could actually take away from some of those higher level, more strategic conversations or, moments of connection that could happen. I don't know. Is that an unpopular opinion? What do we think?
I agree. I think it's a waste to do product training. Every SKO I've ever been to has never walked away with everybody, like you said, saying, maybe here and there you get a little murmurs about a couple sessions that really kicked butt and you were like, yeah, that was pretty good. But most of the time, like, we don't need the product training. That isn't your excuse to get that out of the way for your company. You need to be doing that in other times of the year and planning a better process and structure to how you're going to be doing product rollouts and training. It shouldn't be your sales kickoff. Nobody wants to go spend 4 days learning about product. And why do we care about that when we're going out to our market, not selling features and benefits and actually making conversations that any of this stuff I'm learning, like, I need to know it, but it's not going to make an impact on, our revenue and stuff like that. Like, I want to focus on building with my team, doing other things, and maybe sprinkle in some product here and there, but it shouldn't be the focus. That's definitely a don't on our checklist as we start building this live, right? Don't focus on the product training.
Yeah. Well, I guess.
I think the other thing that you can do there is, again, just to stay very, very far away from teaching the feature benefit stuff, teach your customers. And here's another opportunity. Bring in your best customers. Have them speak. Have them talk about this is the value that we're seeing from your solution. Like getting those stories and hearing them from your customers, everybody wins because your customers love sharing too, right? So now they get that platform.
We did that at one of our SKOs with the enterprise company I was at. That's what they did at every SKO. It was actually us as employees and our customers. We blended our SKO. And so, because we did it for 4 days, right? A week here in Arizona, they'd come down. And one of those days was customer day. And our customers came to our sales kickoff. They got to learn our stuff. They got to feel like they were a part of our company. And then they got to come up on stage and people are just writing in their notepads, all these key things they're dropping and they're putting up these slides. And that's what makes you better sellers. That's what's going to grow your revenue this year. Those are the things we should be focusing on that are going to get that ROI after the fact. By you hearing those stories and being like, we just got done with our SKO and one of our customers told us this, right? Is that similar for you too? It enriches those conversations.
Well, I think in a lot of ways, it comes back to the topic we were talking about at the top of the discussion, which is what are the goals? And if the goal is around, inspiring and keeping people energized and motivated throughout the course of the year, product training is not going to do that. But hearing how top performers are doing things, hearing how our customers are doing things, those are things that stick with you. So definitely can buy that.
And you get free marketing content out of it too. I know Leslie will like that one. We used to chop that stuff up with our customers, right? You get their approval and they even get the content themselves, right? To use in certain things, to push messaging. And so you get content out of it too. Better marketing.
100%. You're speaking my language now, Tom.
It's for you, right?
So I'll keep moving I'm going to go on to the next section. So one of the things that, Leslie, you had mentioned earlier was, getting information about, what's worked. And so that requires you getting data. And, I know if there's any rev ops or sales ops folks on the line or any sales leader that's gone up and done a presentation, they know the pain of getting up there and putting up a bookings target or activity counts or, some attainment levels or something like that. And it's wrong. And you get that one question, that one hand going up from the audience that says, hey, that number is wrong. And boy, that can really sink the ship because now you've got hundreds of people out there in the audience doubting some of those numbers that are up there. But maybe back to like this data in general. like how important is it to incorporate data into your sales kickoffs so that you're talking about facts?
I mean, I'll share one reason that I found that it's very important to me. This is like a very self-centered reason, but I want to know that I'm the best unequivocally. And without clarity of data, it's very easy to be like, well, but you open your opportunities at this point and I actually open them at this point. So really my sales cycles are better, right? Like it leaves too much room for discussion about what's truly working. And in my self-centered view, like that I am doing it the best. Right. And I know a lot of salespeople are motivated by that, by that same passion for really being exceptional at their trade. So I'm going to throw that one out there. I'm going to be a bit vulnerable, reveal something about myself that it's very important to me to have accurate data and to have a piece of the retro highlight, recognize, appreciate the things that unequivocally have been done really, really well by your top AEs, by your top leaders.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'd like to go another direction with that. And the data, what would happen in some that I'd witness is animosity between teams because of missed data as well, right? Being presented. So going back to your vulnerableness there, Leslie, around like from a sales perspective, there's attribution in the org on where revenue is coming from. And if that data isn't accurate, you've got SDRs getting frustrated at their account executives, putting blame, or the account executive blaming marketing because marketing will say that was our lead. We drove that revenue. We used to get SDRs getting frustrated with a slide coming up and they're talking about an account executive's territory and they drove all this revenue, but it's now attributed somewhere else and they're getting frustrated. And now there's little murmurs in your back rooms of your SKO and you have to watch out for that stuff. You have to be cautious of that stuff because it will leak into those relationships once they go dark again and are not in person, and that'll carry over. So that's where the data's got to be super clean and everybody's bought into what it means. You're communicating. You're like, hey, team, they're going to be presenting numbers. Here's how it's going to look from our pipeline as a team and where they're going to be attributing that, right? And getting people involved in that, or just asking, hey, Leslie, is this right? Before we put this out there and we do this, can you just clarify we have all the numbers right from the sales side and like what we got here? And then you get everybody involved before making, a silly of yourself on this live stage, putting up these things that create animosity or frustration or just a bad taste in people's mouths because can't even get our data right.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And one other thing that brought to mind was, on the previous slide, we were talking a lot about, getting top performers, getting folks that have had success on your team up on stage. And, that's another reason why activity data matters is because then you can start spotting, well, who was the best performer? And best performer doesn't always mean that, the highest bookings number. It could be, like you mentioned, an SDR, getting more meetings. It could be a renewal specialist, getting renewals in, or, volume of case studies that they're able to generate. I don't know, but there's lots of other ways to slice up activity that indicate success.
Yeah. Or one of my favorites, Peter, on that point is looking at margin. Who was the most profitable rep? Because I see a lot of people get to the top by discounting their brains out. But there might be somebody who's in that number 3 or 4 spot who out earned them 3 or 4 times for the company because they wrote good business.
Right. Yeah. Or,
that's a great call out. And it allows you then to highlight people for specialization. It's not best. Right. It's this person has an 80% conversion from disco to demo. Like, what are they doing that we're all missing? This person has the highest average price point and didn't do a discount all year. Like, how are they communicating the value in a way that we can all pick up? And I think to the broader point about data, the reason that we do a retro is so that we can figure out what we want to carry forward and what we want to leave behind. And it makes it very difficult to make the best decisions for our reps, for our companies, if we don't have that validated data.
So 100%. Like, if you don't know, or if you're able to spot things like, I don't know, that top performer was multi-threading early. Maybe it was they avoided discounting because they got to the CFO early in the conversation. I don't know, but there's different signals that can really help to identify what those best practices are. Terrific.
I think there was a good kind of an acknowledgement here in the chat just to the data real quick. Peter, is somebody said, how do you know if you can trust your data? Right. Great. And I think that's a great awareness question to bring into your conversations sales kickoff, even throughout the year. Can you answer that confidently, right? And can you acknowledge that what you are bringing, you've set it up to be as trusted as possible, right? Because let's be real, you should be able to go into your CRM and pull these reports and have all the data and be confident to go into the kickoff and put those numbers up there, right? It should just be that way. But normally, 80% of the time, it's not that. You have to clean with a comb, and there's always something missing. So, Leslie, Scott, how would you trust your data? Is there any tips there on how you can know you're doing good there?
It's in the not my department budget.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a garbage in, garbage out, right? So data is never going to be perfect. It's never going to be 100% clean. So, I mean, you do have to go into it with a bit of flexibility, or at least in my experience, in every sales org I've ever worked with or worked for, it's never been 100% perfect, clean data, because we are humans, and a lot of what is being put in is being manually entered. So, I mean, I think that's a big part of it, but I think one of the biggest tricks that I see organizations missing is creating very clear criteria and very clear triggers. And depending on the size of your org, that might just be an SOP that says this is exactly when something becomes an SLQ. This is exactly when an opportunity gets opened, or this is the exact number of days you can have it open before you need to mark it up close lost if they've gone dark. I think that creates cleaner data. But then, unless you have a Salesforce admin that's setting up a lot of or HubSpot or whatever your CRM is, unless you have somebody that can set up some of those triggers and monitor that, a lot of that can fall on the rep's shoulders and often becomes a low priority task in the midst of a lot of competing priorities.
That's a great point, because it's like you'd mentioned also in an earlier comment, Leslie, there's that inconsistency because different reps are going to do things in a different way, and so if you're not automating that collection of data, it is going to be inconsistent. And really, when you're up on stage, you want to have it complete. You want to have that data be complete. You want it to be accurate, and preferably automated so that it's you're not imposing on the reps to have to do these things, but you're just collecting that automatically. And especially these days, where there's so many other tools like sales engagement tools that are out there that that are collecting data. There's just this wave of data. You need to be able to get that into one place and make sure that it's that accurate activity information.
Yep.
Well, terrific. Let's move on to the next one. And I think in this case, we're now taking the data, but then now building on that. And, so we've been able to look back and see, how well did we attain our numbers? How well were we building bookings? It's also interesting things like, looking into, what activities are being most performant. So now let's build on that. What kind of insights should you be drawing from that? I love the idea of that white space and getting top performers up there talking. So if you were starting to think about, well, what would some of those topics be, that you'd have those top performers up there talking about, what would be some good examples of those workshops that you would love to attend?
Well, Peter, I think this builds, right? If you've got good data, the data is interesting. Yeah, maybe I want to see that. Maybe I can come up with my own ideas, but it's really taking that data and showing what are the insights? What can we learn from the data? And then more importantly, humanizing that. So how did that actually show up? And that's, again, where you tie into your top performers. Who performed best against this metric that we know is a great early indicator of future success in our sales process? Who executed that best? Have them tell that story, have them show their numbers, right? So that's the other thing where I think data can get a little bit hard is when we look at it in aggregate, we maybe don't see the full story of what it really does and what it really means when we look at it for an individual that's excelling.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And now you're able to kind of create a benchmark, right? Here's what the average, performer did, and here were their results, but here's what the top performers did. And look, their results were orders of magnitudes better. Maybe there's something here.
Right. Tom or Leslie?
Yeah, I mean, we're thinking about like do's and don'ts as a framework, right? And I think this is a particularly difficult question to put into do and don't, because those topics are probably going to vary based on the maturity of your org, the size of your org, et cetera. But I would say don't center your entire SKO around these types of conversations. Like it's good to highlight a few learnings, platform, a few people that are really specialists in XYZ area. But my do would be to make sure that there's a heavy mix of those like talking at sessions with interactive or very conversational sessions. And some of what I've seen work best are a question that needs to be answered, or like a hypothetical situation that we might need to solve with outbound or solve with renewals in 2023. And then people get together and workshop it. Because it gets the juices flowing, you're learning from one another, you're building that trust, and then there's an outcome at the end that could potentially be beneficial in terms of a way forward for the org. So thinking about the do's and don'ts, just really make sure that you are prioritizing interactivity and collaboration as much as, or maybe more than, the talking at type sessions.
Sounds like a great way to organize a webinar too. It's great. Tom?
I can just attest to that. Again, going back to the SKOs I've done, right, it was a couple days, and one of those days would be full workshop days. And it was no more talking at you. It was multiple tables with multiple topics, and they only allow one person or 1 to 2 people per role to be at one set table together. So it was really cool because it was bringing in different marketing and everybody, different roles all coming to one table, right? And workshopping this challenge. They give you scenarios on the table. We even started doing like some cool engagement is like do like a talent show or act out the scenarios and workshop it like on stage. So we would have people come up, right? And they'd have like a whole skit on the table, all playing out. And then they would have that come and be, acted out on stage. And to your point, Leslie, right? When you start doing those things, this is how you're getting buy-in. This is how you're getting your team to work through things together. And then you even get those top performers to kind of, what we would do is start with the top performer talking about like a big renewal, right? Let's say we were up for renewals. You get them talking about the renewal, how they won this one, some best practices. Then you have everybody break off to like now replicate that in their scenarios that are on the table, or now go workshop this and start figuring out ways that we might edit the system to help us with renewals, or what did you take from that? And then you get everybody bought in, and you're seeing, to Scott's point, the what's the tie-in to how it actually works in our everyday life. Reps forget that part. They hear the number, they think it's so great, they see all the data, but like, how do I feel that? How do I know what that actually translates to? And then you get that story from one of your fellow AEs or one of your team members, and you're like, oh, wow, like that's the impact in real terms. Versus, hey, we helped this company. It's just like an email and outreach. Don't tell somebody you helped them get 25% extra in this. Tell a story about it, right? And share why that 25% increase meant to your customer. Don't tell me you gave me 25% increase. I don't care. Like, why did that help that customer, and what would it mean for me? Kind of a bit.
I mean, stories stick with you. There's no doubt about that. And so, we're talking about keeping that feelings going throughout the course of the year. You're going to forget the number, but you're going to remember the story. So yeah, great.
That next renewal comes up to a challenge, right? You'll actually maybe put a little extra oomph in keeping it because you understand the importance of what the renewal could mean for the customer, not your company, right? Or what does it mean for the company too? Again, what I think somebody said earlier, that's where you pull from during those challenging and hard times throughout the year. You remember and you buy in, you're like, I'm going to fight for this renewal. No, I get it. I know what this means and what goals we're trying to do. Versus some reps be like, lost another renewal. I'm not invested. Not my big thing. I don't care.
Right. Well, speaking of customer, I think that gets into the fourth priority point out of the 5 that we were looking at, which, we spoke a little bit earlier about bringing customers in and using their insights to help keep the conversation going. It sounds like there's a lot of agreement around that is something that really matters. But what else would you when you're looking for the right kind of customer to bring to your SKO, what attributes would you be looking for?
I'm looking for somebody who moved from a competitor. That's one I always bring or want to schedule around, is somebody that, has went from a prior customer or competitive product, and then get them to share their journey with us and why they came over, what they've done since, and come share that to the group, because then people can take, again, those stories, those understandings, why that person thought differently, with our product, to now go do more of that with other customers.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I think can be helpful, and in a broader frame, I think you want to think about this being customer training instead of product training. Mm-hmm. And so in those lines, just getting deeper into what is your day-to-day. Like if you have a primary stakeholder that makes a decision on your solution or is primarily impacted by whatever it is that you're selling, just getting into kind of the day in the life kind of stuff. Right? Like, what is your world? What are you dealing with? Like, what are you measured on? When do you get a bonus? How do you get promoted? What are the things that you're trying to achieve? And just the more that we can understand that, the better we can relate to our customers, and that's going to make us better sellers.
Tom has it right that is such a tweetable thing that you just said there, Scott.
That was good, Scott. Customer training over product training, right? And that's what you want to do in your SKO, is get closer to your customer. Walk away knowing really what did results of last year do. Like, don't come and tell me we closed 20 million in revenue. Come share with me that we closed 100 customers and what we did for them.
Yeah.
Right? And what we did on the impact in the space. Did we grab 20% more market share, helping customers, be able to get their data quicker? And what that's done is it's helped all of right? Like, get me closer to the customer. I don't care that, like, I know what the revenue means. That's, helping your pockets, and maybe I get a bonus. Sure. But like, get closer to that customer, bring that voice to the SKO, bring them into your SKO, make a dinner, where you're inviting some of your key customers to a banquet that night with your company, right? Get them there. If you don't want them in your actual kickoff, bring them to your outing that you're going to be planning, right? Invite a few there, and just dig into these questions that you mentioned, Scott.
Yeah.
Scott,
I want to come back to Ashley. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Leslie.
I was saying you went with a full mic drop on that one. I have an adjacent thought, but not a continuous thought. So I want to hear what you have to say first.
Well, I wanted to make sure we didn't lose the thread. So Ashley commented earlier in the chat about really kind of telling the story of what does the revenue that you bring in mean. So I think one idea is the customer side, right? What does this mean to a customer? What is the impact on them? But especially if you've got a really good, strong, transparent, communicative culture, let's be real. Like, the economy is challenging this year. Like, we're going to be facing some headwinds. And if you can see the impact of, look, if we as a team are able to bring in this level of revenue, nobody gets laid off. Like, at the end of the day, a lot of times we've got the whole freaking company on our backs, but we don't think about that. We don't humanize that, right? So the other thing I think, we're talking about bringing our customers to our SKOs, absolutely, but bringing other departments to our SKOs, right?
Yes.
Like, bringing our partners together, bringing customer success in, bringing freaking accounting and finance. Like, everybody makes this happen, and all of those relationships are important as we serve our customers, right? I need all of their help to deliver a great contiguous experience. So starting to build those relationships, the SKO is the perfect opportunity to do that as well, and think about this a little bit more broadly.
I've done many SKOs with just commercial teams, and then I've done quite a few with the entire company, and absolutely prefer the ones that have the entire company there. That's a really good shout. And I was thinking of something else when we were talking about the customer perspective. First off, I've never done that. So, just hat tipped that I learned something new and exciting today. But one piece that I have loved that is that perspective that's like, it's not just about revenue. There are other things going on here in terms of impact we're making, are sharing some of the like CSR, ESG things you're doing. Maybe your company became 12% more diverse. Maybe you reduced your water waste by 23%. Like, we all know that those types of initiatives are increasingly important for individuals as they look at staying with organizations, as they look at where they're going to go. And revenue is great. We all know we need revenue. But like, that's not going to be enough for me to stay at a company anymore. Like, I need to know the organization that I'm working at is tracking towards goals that are maybe slightly more meaningful in terms of like humanity than just revenue. So I want to hear something inspirational about the impact that we're making on fronts like sustainability or innovation or diversity.
That is a great point. That is the kind of energy that keeps you focused on that company and focused on supporting the company throughout the year. You're totally right, Leslie. Tom, you had a thought?
I was just going to acknowledge that, like, we did it at 2 SKOs, and we highlighted like our impact on the environment and the economy. And then what we do at every SKO is actually one of the days we set up a time to do something back for the community. So at one year, we had all these local students come from some local schools, and everybody came in and we paired people up and they built bikes. We made it a competition within the teams. So you pulled numbers, everybody had to come up with a team name, and for a few hours, you built a bike that was going to be donated back to these children. And so at the end of the time, when everybody built their bikes, these kids came in and were like freaked out. We got to deliver the bikes, and it made people feel really good. And another time we did pizza boxes. So during the lunch break, we had set up a booth, and everybody came through and they were getting their meal, and we had highlighters, folders, all these things, and you made boxes together. You'd come through the line, you'd put one together, you'd put it off to the side, and then we give that back to the local community. So when you're doing like voluntary work too, like you bring that into those initiatives and what you're doing beyond just, cool, we're doing revenue. What else are we doing with that revenue, right? Is it going to your pockets for another Lamborghini? Is it going to, us getting laid off in 6 months when you're all happy with what you made? Or are we like taking initiatives and doing things and then getting your team throughout the year to do a committee that is involved in those things? Bring that committee into your org and do like local events, things like that once a quarter. Makes a big difference for people wanting longevity.
Point of like how to carry it forward. That is your charity, or that is your cause for the year. And I don't mean to be overly practical, but I'm assuming we have a lot of leadership on this call, and like budgets are real. We saw that almost 40% of people are 500 or less per person. That's a tight budget, but something like what Tom just described, it's a very low cost way to drive serious impact during an in-person gathering. Great. That's a great one, Tom. Love that addition.
These are great.
I love all the comments. There's people that do this. I didn't even know it was a thing. Like, it's so cool, and like there's offerings, but that's awesome.
Yeah, that is great. Yeah, Sarah, thanks for sharing also those case studies there. That's fantastic. So we'll just go into the final priority that we wanted to talk about before we move over to take a look at the live work that's been going on the do's and don'ts list. So that's about targets and tooling and the like. So generally when you're doing a sales kickoff, the year has probably already started. The financial year has probably already started for you. So your targets are already probably in place, or they're just being announced. So how do you make sure that those targets are, that they're communicated in a way that's motivating, that's not going to be, a drag on the team, and suddenly that inspiration that everyone was feeling is suddenly turned into ashes in the mouth, because now it's all about that money.
I mean, never have I ever gotten targets for myself or my team like before February.
Yeah.
So I've never had
that's a good time.
Discussion at a January kickoff, because I'm usually getting those solidified from finance at like week 4 to 6, which I'm sure many people find relatable that are joining us today. I don't know. What do you guys think? I feel like I'm like not the expert on this one. It would be the dream. I mean, hopefully you have the data and you can make the quick decisions. But I've not been there.
Well, here's my thought here, right? I think ideally the best setup here is you don't want to really in any part of your SKO, but especially when it comes to this, when it comes to how are you going to achieve your number for the year, it's not giving people the answer. It's helping people find their answers, right? It's helping them go, oh, okay, here's the way I'm going to break this down. Here's the things that I'm learning that I'm going to be able to use to get there. And I think the ideal outcome for me, right, is I'm thinking about SKO. We started with this, but I want people walking away feeling like I got this. Like this feels totally achievable. I took away everything I need to know to overachieve my numbers this year. I know the things I need to do. I know the people that are going to help me get there. Right. And I came to those answers because there's no way somebody's going to give this to me on a platter. Right. Because that's going to get just tossed out. Right. It has to be, we're kind of giving them the ingredients. We're giving them the components that's going to allow them to assemble their plan. And now they have ownership of their process, of their results.
Well, I think you workshop this, right? This is a great opportunity through your sales kickoff to, if you want to give them the targets and the tools, let them come up with it, right? Like workshop it out. And after you've presented some numbers, you talk about, your growth for the year, things like that, you let them go workshop it, kind of get that buy-in, right? And figure out, because if your SKO is anything of a success, it should be giving them the how and the what and the why behind everything. So now they can formulate kind of their own buy-in, and then going to Leslie's point, right? As a leader, I can go back after this SKO and roll out my numbers come February and say, cool, they're all bought in. I understand, like all of them said they would like this to be the goal, or this is what they're all focused on. Now we can make some pretty realistic terms that makes sense for everybody, and we know they're bought in. So you can leverage it in a couple different ways there.
Terrific. Well, my colleague Michaela has been helping out behind the scenes and collecting some of these do's and don'ts that the panelists have been providing, as well as from the chat from participants on the session. So let's go ahead and take a little look at some of the do's and don'ts that we've pulled together here. We'll share those. I believe, Savannah, we'll be sharing these after the webinar as well. But let's start with this part one here on the do's. So set goals focused on attaining clarity and deepening trust. So, really getting back to that idea of, it's not so much about the product training. It's making sure that folks are clear on what the mission is and, that they trust others in the organization, that they're going to be there and have their back for going forward. Also, taking a look at, the sales kickoff, maybe one day, maybe 2 days. If it's virtual, maybe it's spread over multiple days. But how do you keep that momentum going throughout the 12 months ahead until the next sales kickoff, the next sales meeting? You want to have that momentum constantly going forward. And you're not going to get that just simply from product training. You're going to get that from relationships. You're going to get that from vision and mission as well. I love that third one. There was a lot of good discussion around how you identify those top performers and really leverage that in-house talent, I think is what you called it, Tom. So leveraging that in-house talent so that they can share the knowledge, workshop with each other. And I think there was another point that Scott, I think you may have mentioned it, where it was the idea of that it's not simply that the top performer is out there just lecturing, but rather, or I'm sorry, Leslie, I think you had mentioned this about workshopping on a problem and sort of getting the team together. I don't know who said it. Someone said it, but it was great. It was great insight, whoever said it, as getting workshopping on a particular problem and helping to address that. Just love that idea. So any thoughts before we moved into the don'ts? I mean, does this look like, did we capture a lot of the right do's here?
This is solid. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing I would add that we haven't touched on that I think is just so important is thinking about this as an experience and thinking about the entire experience, right? Because I think a lot of times we get too focused in and tunnel vision around the agenda and what's the content we're going to deliver. But think about what else is going to happen in and around this event. Is there some way, and I think you also need to be thinking about this before, during, and after. Is there a little bit of homework and prep that we can have people do that's going to enhance that experience and help us be more productive in our time together, right? And just all of the other pieces, the meals, the lodging. Are we doing something creative with the lodging? Can we get out of a freaking hotel and not be in a ballroom? That would be freaking amazing.
Right.
Just all of those little things. And then that after, right? After is part of the experience. What happens a week after? What happens a month after? How do we reinforce what we have learned and taken away? Experience.
And that I think speaks to one of the don'ts that's here, which is not overloading that agenda, and making sure that you have that open space, that white space. I think, as someone mentioned, that white space, so that you can develop those relationships and really learn from each other. I think then I'll just wrap up on this part 2 here, which was a little bit more on the do's and don'ts. So big insight as well was making sure that when you're up on stage, when you're inviting top performers, that you've got that clean and complete, accurate data that's been collected about the activities, about what's been booked, about what the pipeline looks like. Making sure that you have that consensus on those numbers, so that when you're up there, that you're confident about the conclusions that you're drawing, those insights about what the top performers are doing, that those are available for you, and then being able to take action, so that you're converting those insights into actual activities that can be that individual performers can take back home and really work on. And I'm just going to conclude on a point that Scott just dropped into the chat, which was making sure that you keep that feeling going throughout the year. So it's not about that product training. It's about what's the customer story? How do you feel? It's those kind of softer elements that really are going to carry you through the year. I think that's one of the main things I've taken from this.
Yep, lots of good stuff in this session. Thank you all for joining in. Thank you, Peter, Leslie, Scott, Tom, for sharing so much insight with us. We will definitely include the do's and don'ts list in the email with the recording after we all hop off. This event was one for the books, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Next week, we've got Mary Shea and Mark McNaga revealing findings from our recent State of Sales Tech Stack report. So I hope you all are able to hop on that event next Thursday. I thank you all for setting aside the time today to be with us, be in the chat, be engaged, and be involved in creating this do's and don'ts list. We hope to see you all next week. And I thank you all again for tuning in.